welcome to the National Academy of Public Administration. I see lots of familiar faces and some that I don't know quite so well, but we are really pleased to welcome you here today for what I think is going to be a very interesting conversation. You know that NAPA has been on the front lines of conversations about civil service reform with our No Time to Wait reports. And I think we've really pushed the conversation about what might be possible at the federal level. What you're going to hear today is a lot more about what it takes to actually do it, and at the state level. So I'm not going to steal the thunder from the two folks who are on the dais here in front of you, but I do want to make two announcements. We are filming today's conversation, and so when we get to the discussion portion, we are going to ask that you wait for a mic so that we can pick up the sound, and that you introduce yourself when the mic gets to you so that we've got that on the record. And then I also want to ask all of you to find your cell phones right now and silence them, please, because we don't want to be interrupted in the course of the discussion. So with that, I'd now like to introduce Steve Goodrich. Steve is the CEO of the Center for Organizational Excellence. He has a long history and experience of leading organizations and advising top government and private sector leaders in organizational effectiveness strategies to improve performance and effectiveness. Steve and CEO have been great partners of the Academy, and I'm going to turn this over to him now to introduce today's content and our speaker. So Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks for all of you coming. This is sort of the warm-up for the one tomorrow morning with the White House, where we'll have all the Chicos and Capco leads, but this one's certainly just as important. Today we want to have a conversation about civil service reform. Sounds interesting, right? The thing we talk about often and all the time. But the reality is we've got to find a better way. We certainly, get, manage, transition people, the people that get the work done of government. And for the next 2 hours, we just want to have this conversation. We'll hear from Rebecca about the kinds of things that she's done. But it's interesting to me that with all the conversations almost every day I have around civil service reform, it's like the third rail. Everybody wants to talk about it, nobody wants to do it. And it's one thing to transform an HR function or an HR department to be more efficient at what it does. It's different to really then transform the civil service of government. And recently I was up on the Hill talking to a couple of members in the House, and they invited me up to talk about civil service reform. And at the end of the meeting they said, "This is just too hard. Can we do something about how we attract interns to government? Maybe we could just do that and call it a day." And I didn't leave with my head hung low. I said, this is certainly still possible. Within that, we need to dramatically just change our thinking about what civil service can be. How we go about paying people, how we go about rewarding people, how we identify the people who are part of our civil service and the contributions they make, how we transition people to other jobs for retirement. It's not, we have this, even as managers and leaders that we see in government, we expect our people to come and be hired and be here for 30 years. What's the matter if we hire them and they're here for 3 or 4 years? And they give us their best 3 or 4 years. And we have systems in place to move them and transition them and backfill them within a logical framework, within a logical period of time. So in the private sector, for example, I was telling Terry, we had an accounting person who just left us. She retired after 13 years. We hired her replacement a month or weeks before. You don't see that in government. We don't start a hiring action until after they leave, putting the organization at risk for certainly getting the work done. So I believe we can do a lot. you watch how things classify and how long it takes to, I was just talking to one agency that has a backlog of almost 1,800 classification actions that hasn't dropped in over 2 years. That backlog is still there. You know, others have just blown up the classification process. So at HHS, for example, when they send people through the hiring process and they then have their certifications, the hiring manager has 21 days to act on those certs. After that, it opens up to the whole department. No more, you don't have to competitively go out for that role. If there's somebody on that cert that meets your needs and another division, another optiv is part of the department, you can also pick off that same cert. Dramatically creating a much faster hiring process. So to stimulate this discussion, I invited Rebecca Hunter to be here. Last December, I flew out to Tennessee to meet with Rebecca. I brought 2 federal HR directors with me. And when they left, they were sitting at the airport to fly home and their mouths are hanging open. They discovered the possible. So, and Rebecca was very, very kind to give us a day with her and her staff and share all her plans. You see reports, the handouts out there that I see some of you have, that has a lot of the things she's done that she'll talk about. She also has the legislation she passed, and a copy of that is in there. So Rebecca was on the governor's cabinet. She was the commissioner of HR for the state of Tennessee, reporting directly to the governor for 8 years. Within that, prior to that, she was 6 years HR director for a county in Tennessee and spent 25 years in management of finance. She has a CPA. She's a certified senior HR professional. And here is something that I certainly found interesting, which is really a testimony to what she's done. She established the Department of HR for the state as a place to innovate. Now, think about that word for a moment. HR, a place to innovate. That's incredibly important when you hear what she had to say. She began when she got there with a listening tour. Soon she started formulating legislation. She socialized that with all the State Department heads. She got the governor's approval. She walked it through the legislature, and in 6 months got it passed. It focused on customer service. It focused on performance, hiring, compensation. They changed the way they arbitrate. They changed the way they train people. It's truly the entire life cycle. This resulted in her department winning the State of Tennessee Baldrige Award for quality. And one last thing that I think was important, that her commitment, her energy, and the things that she did, in 2018, the Tennessee Government Leadership Council created the Rebecca Hunter Award for Leadership Excellence across the state. So we're going to hear from Rebecca and the things that she did. And she does have some cuts and bruises, I know, and certainly getting through it, but she got through it. I was amazed. Her training director, I get calls from people in the federal government. Where can I find her? I want to hire her. I don't know if she wants to leave Tennessee, but it's when she said to me, we don't bring people to training to fix broken. We come to accelerate people. And what they do and how they do it, you'll hear. So we're going to hear from Rebecca. We want you to engage in a dialogue. Your questions are important. Your observations are important. So let's get this started. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Rebecca Hunter.
Thank you so much, Steve. Can y'all hear me?
You can turn your mic on.
I did.
Okay.
Joe's got. So it is really my pleasure to be here with you all today, and I'm glad it's such an intimate audience because I think that's just going to make the discussion more robust. And what I want to do is I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself because I think that helps you understand how we were able to do what we did. I am number 6 of 14 children, which meant I grew up as a peacemaker and a collaborator. That's in my DNA. I have one child, and I can honestly say I've changed more diapers on my siblings than I have on my own daughter. I also am a PK. How many know what PK is? Yep, preacher's kid. So I grew up in the fishbowl, not realizing how well that prepared me for public service. Because as Steve shared with you, I have spent my entire career in public service at all different levels of government. He shared with you I'm a CPA, so I describe myself as a recovering accountant. And I did, in fact, spend the first 25 years of my career in public finance. And if you had told me 15 years ago that I would have a life-changing career move from the finance arena over into HR, I would not have believed you, and certainly wouldn't have believed that if you told me I would be serving on Governor Haslam's cabinet running HR for the largest employer in the state. That probably would have just freaked me out. But I can tell you that my transition to HR was not because I was an HR guru. Clearly, if I'm in finance, I can't be an HR guru, but it was because I had an extreme focus on customer service. I was passionate about serving the people, knowing who our customers are, and then providing great service to them. And then I love building relationships. I love making connections. I love thinking to myself, who else needs to know what I know? I think people tend to be hoarders of information. And when you approach your work, who else needs to know what I know? It builds those bridges and builds relationships and contributes to the collaboration. I was able to, I knew going into HR, I inherited the agency of no, and this was, as Steve mentioned, this was at county government. And I had one of the nicest compliments ever paid to me by a team member at the state, and she said what she learned from me was start with yes. And I would consistently tell my team at the state of Tennessee, folks, if we start out saying no, they're just going to go do whatever they want to do, and then they're going to come back and ask us to clean up the mess. So you've got to ask great questions. If you ask the right questions, you can find out what is it they're really trying to do, and 9 times out of 10, you can help them get there. It might just be a different route. So starting with yes, and I told them, I said, that doesn't mean I want you to be yes people, because we don't want that, but if you have that cooperative, collaborative spirit going into a discussion with a customer, those times when you do have to say no, they're going to respect you and accept that no answer. And so my success in HR at Hamilton County Government is what brought me the opportunity to serve for 8 years with Governor Haslam. So I want to start out by sharing with you, just so you kind of get a feel for what we walked into. I want to share with you the top 5 surprises that just kind of blew my mind when I walked into state government. And the first one was an extreme focus on seniority with no accountability. And there was basically what I would call a sense of entitlement. And again, knowing that I had served in the public sector for my entire career, I wasn't familiar with that entitlement mentality. It was just a little bit shocking to me. I found out about probably 3 to 6 months in, I was having lunch with the deputy governor who I had served with in Hamilton County and said, well, you're not going to believe what I learned today. I learned that state employees have a property right to their job. And he said, oh, what? And I said, yeah, it really means we can't terminate them. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to, that it's their job and we have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, almost like going to court, why we were firing them. And then you all are familiar with the legislative process at the federal level. On a local level, it doesn't happen like it does on a state level. On a local level, you have 10, 12, 15 council members or county commissioners, and it's staff that's bringing all that, either the ordinances or the resolutions for the legislative body to vote on. On a federal level and on the state level, you've got all those legislators bringing all those bills. And it was a little mind-boggling to realize that 2,500 bills are being brought, and if I didn't have somebody on the team looking at every single one of those bills, the odds of them bringing a bill that would blow up what I was trying to do were pretty great. And so that was a huge learning curve for me. And then the political power of our state employee association. We're a right-to-work state, so we didn't have unions, but we have an employee association. And I mentioned to a couple of you, what that meant is they're contributing to the political campaigns of the legislators. And so they're going to support what it is they want to do, whether it's right or wrong. And so that was really eye-opening for me as well, to realize what political power an employee association could have. And then finally, I walked into a decentralized human resources with no focus on professional development for the HR teams, each agency having their own HR director. And I came from an organization where we set HR policy for the entire organization, which still occurs at the state, but it becomes a challenge when you have each agency doing their own thing and you don't have those consistent, repeatable processes. So Steve mentioned this briefly, but our steps to discovery, Governor Haslam early on asked each cabinet member to do a top-to-bottom review of their agency. And his directive was, I want you to think about, as you look at what your agency does, ask yourself, should we be doing each of these functions that we're doing, or could those functions be better performed in the private sector? Could they be more effectively and efficiently performed in the private sector? If so, identify those. And if we should be doing these functions, are we doing them as effectively and efficiently as we can? And so that was really the framework for our top-to-bottom review. And I'll go ahead and tell you, there are 23 cabinet members in the state of Tennessee. To a T, every single cabinet member came back and said, oh my gosh, you have got to do something about our antiquated employment practices, or we're never going to be able to do anything in moving Tennessee forward. The second initiative was our Commissioner of Finance, who the governor brought off from retirement. I've talked to several of y'all here who have failed at retirement. But I think we're so passionate about the work that we do. He talked the Commissioner of Finance off the beaches of Spain, because his wife's from Spain. He was the former CEO of Bridgestone Americas. Talked him into coming in and being the Commissioner of Finance for 2 years. And it struck him when he came in, as he'd never worked in the public sector before, it struck him that we never referred to our citizens as customers. And so he sent out a survey to all the executive branch agencies and said, I'd love your ideas on how to make state government more effective, efficient, and customer focused. He got back almost 700 responses, almost half of which were about the state's employment practices. And I'll go ahead and tell you that he's savvy enough to know you don't survey people that don't do something about it. And when he realized first of all, half of it was HR, he said, I want you on a committee. He also invited about a handful of other cabinet members to serve on a committee that would begin to tackle what we got out of that survey, especially those that were cross-agency, because if one agency's having a problem, the other agency's having a problem too, and let's see what we can do collectively to solve some of these problems. And then the third initiative that we did, and this was all in the first year of the administration, was the deputy governor and I went on an employee listening tour across the state. We've got 45,000 employees, and I realize every time Steve tells me about the magnitude of an agency in federal government, I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, y'all have huge agencies, but I came from 2,000 employees to 45,000, so I'm here to tell you it can be done. But we went on an employee listening tour. We went to our 4 major cities, and it really was a listening tour, because I remember walking in, and each time the deputy governor would kick it off, and he would say, we're here, we want to hear from you how to recruit and retain the best employees. And I can remember employees look at me and saying, I don't want to hurt your feelings. And I would say, I'm new, I've inherited all this, you tell me what you need to tell me, because we want to make some positive changes. You all are on the front lines, and you all can help us do this. And I will tell you that so much of what we heard on that listening tour was incorporated into the bill, because we heard people say, my supervisor won't speak to me, which was just mind-boggling for me. I can't imagine having a supervisor that you couldn't talk to and let them help you with issues you were dealing with. I can't fire people. I can't hire people. I mean, you all can only imagine. The list went on and on and on. So that was kind of what we used to develop the bill. And as Steve mentioned, you've got the bill in your packet of information there. And I will tell you, we went around and looked at other states to see, and we're able to pull, like Indiana was doing some pretty cool things at the time, so we pulled some things from Indiana. But the bulk of it came from what we learned from top to bottom reviews, the survey around customer service and effective and efficient government, and the listening tour. So our approach was, once we realized the magnitude of what we were looking at, it became pretty clear this could not be the Department of Human Resources bill. There was no way, because it impacts every single state agency. So the good news was it's going to be the governor's bill. And we were blessed to have a governor who, he had that perfect blend of private sector. He grew up working in his dad's business, and also served as the mayor of Knoxville for about 7 years. So he had that perfect blend of private sector, but had the government background as well, which I think is pretty critical when you're coming into dealing with bureaucracy in the public sector. And he was really passionate about, he said, the team with the best players wins. And we have got to get the best players. And the only way that's going to happen is if we create a bill and drive it from his office. So, in fact, we figured that out pretty early. Probably about 6 months in, there was a group of my senior team and his senior team that began to meet to actually start working on the bill. And so we had that broad support. He announced it at his legislative conference in January of 2012. So again, you've got the governor of the state that's helping to promote and really drive the transformation. We ran it like a campaign. In fact, I should send it to Steve and he could share it with you all. One of his team members created a YouTube video that explained bumping and retreating. And those of you that are familiar with union practices, you understand bumping and retreating. And they sent it out to the constituent base that he knew helped to get him elected, because most of them are private sector, and let them understand how would you want to run your business like this. And we listened extensively. We began the day that the governor launched the press conference with his legislative package. He gave the bill to the State Employee Association, and we began meeting with them periodically to begin, the negotiation process. And we started out with the world in there. We put everything in there we thought we could possibly get, because we knew we were going to have to negotiate some things out. But we listened and remained flexible whenever we could. And our goal was really to make, and you'll see the purpose statement in that bill, it was to make state government more effective, to be able to allow managers to actually manage, and also to positively impact the workforce, because we all know work is not going to get done if you don't have great employees there who are inspired and motivated to do great work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the highlights of the bill. I'm going to cover each of those fairly briefly, and then I'm going to pause and ask for questions, because I've got some other things I'm pretty passionate about I want to share with you too, but I definitely want to give you all opportunities to ask questions that have come to you. So the highlights of the bill were recruiting and hiring, performance management, the employee appeals process, Steve referred to as arbitration, reductions in force, and learning and development. And our approach Steve said we had 6 months. The governor signed the bill on April 24th, and it was effective October 1st. And I was really fortunate to meet some folks from Franklin Covey who introduced me to the 4 disciplines of execution. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with that amazing tool, but what's so great about it is it helps you focus on a wildly important goal. And our wildly important goal was to get this bill implemented while you're caught up in the whirlwind of the everyday activities. And we were in that almost impossible situation of we had to continue to provide services the way we'd always done them until that bill was effective, while at the same time rewriting policies. And if y'all are like us, we had to do first the law, then we had to do rules. I'm sure y'all have to do rules too, and then we had to do policies. That was all new for me too. I didn't know what the rules were until getting into state government. And the 4 disciplines of execution was an amazing tool to engage our frontline staff in the changes. And I will tell you, from a change management perspective for me, the very first thing I did was in fact, I went to the governor and said, Governor, I know you're going to announce this at your press conference. Now keep in mind, before this was a top secret project. Members of my team, our senior team, and members of the governor's team were the only ones that knew that this was coming. And you never want to get ahead of the governor any more than y'all want to get ahead of the president. So we couldn't talk about it. And so I went to the governor and I said, Governor, we are getting ready to totally turn my department upside down with how we approach our work. I would love to have your blessing to let my team know this is coming. I don't want them hearing about this on the news. And he said, absolutely. So about an hour before the press conference, I pulled the whole team together and shared with them that this was going to be huge and it was going to majorly impact them. And I said, I'm going to need your help in order to make this happen. I cannot do this on my own. And I'm going to be coming and meeting with each of you. And that's exactly what I did. We gave everybody a copy of the bill, and then we went and met with each division. And so we met with our folks that hire people and said, tell us what scares you about this, what gets you excited, what are some of the things that you have thought about that you wanted to do in the past and it just wasn't possible, but now we've got the possibility of doing things. And I did that more than once to engage them in the process because I didn't want to shove anything down their throat, and I was really trying to get team members to be champions of what it was we were trying to do. Because again, this was a statewide bill that affected everyone in the executive branch, unless they were exempted out. And you'll see there were a handful of agencies that were exempted out. So really involving them. And then my next step was I had HR teams across the state in all these different agencies that didn't have any idea what this was about. We also gave them the bill and said, please read through it. We really want to hear from you too. Any concerns, any ideas? And ultimately, in order to launch it, we hosted a huge 2.5-day HR conference where the concurrent sessions were each component of the bill. So we did one for hiring, we did one for performance management, we did one for the employee appeals process, we did one for reductions in force. And I can remember, Steve mentioned she would die if she knew you called her the training officer. She's the chief learning officer for the state of Tennessee, and she was the first one for a state in the country. And I'm going to get to why that was so important. But we brought in keynote speakers to really, so that we weren't totally blowing people's minds. We wanted to inspire them. So we had keynote speakers who talked about, some inspirational things, but those breakout sessions were deep, that's where they actually learned, oh, that's how it's going to work. And, oh, have you thought about this? Because that's why we wanted them there. Wait a minute, I'm not sure how that works. How am I going to make that happen? And so it was a hugely successful conference because all we focused on was the TEAM Act. It's the Tennessee Excellence in Accountability and Management Act. And that's what we focused on to help them get up to speed on the bill itself. So, and part of what I've driven from the very, very beginning is promoting a continuous improvement mindset. Even though it was effective October 1, we weren't done. We were just getting started. And we continue to make changes and to make things better and to improve the processes up until the day I walked out the door. And I've shared with a couple of you that I feel fortunate that the person who stepped into my shoes at the state is really excited about everything we created and just wants to build on it. So from a recruiting and hiring perspective, we transitioned from examination scores, we quit scoring people, and to job descriptions based on knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies. And I had to bring in outside experts to help us do this because I had a team of entitled people who were in our classification and compensation division that said, well, this is how we've always done it. And if I had the swear jar, we had our this is how we've always done it jar. If you say that, put $1 in it because that doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. Just because we've always done it that way.
You paid for your whole department that way.
And we brought in, there's a great group of folks at the Middle Tennessee State University, which is like 30 minutes outside of Nashville, who focus on HR. And they actually came in and led the team in redrafting all of the job descriptions. And we just did them as they came along because what we found, we did cleanup. What we found in the process is not all of those, we didn't need all those. We streamlined and narrowed our focus to those that we actually needed. But that was really huge. And part of what we heard in that listening tour was, well, HR scores, and I forgot the best part. If you were hiring from the outside, you chose from the top 5 scores on the list. There were people on the list who had died. Because once you applied for the position, you never had to apply again. So your name was always on, once you applied for that classification, your name was always on that list. It was horrible. And for promotional, it was the top 3. And so people would, agencies would get those registers and say, I've already interviewed these people. I don't want them. And so we had vacancies. I know I had a 25% vacancy in my department when I first took over, because people would say, if that's who I have to work with, I'm not hiring them. So we blew up the scoring. We blew up the top 3, top 5, and we said, okay, we're going to send you everybody who meets minimum qualifications, which is exactly what they asked for. You know, be careful what you ask for. We had to come back and help them, because you can only imagine, for being a Tennessee State Trooper is a cool thing. So they get thousands of applications to be a Tennessee State Trooper. So we had to come back and we helped them come up with an electronic first round interview. And it really says, and I'll give you an example. If you're hiring an accountant, they need to be able to demonstrate for you in some way in that first round interview that they're familiar with Excel. So you think about things that you wouldn't get from an application necessarily or a resume, but you want to know, who do I really want to interview here? You're going to look for those people that are really great at coming back on that first round interview. It helps you narrow down the list of applicants to a more manageable pool of applicants. And that's taken time too. We didn't do that overnight. That didn't happen by October 1st. That came back, you know, every time we got feedback from our customers, this isn't working, this is too much, we can't do this. We'd sit down with them and listen. And I think that's really, really important. You've got to be open to your customer feedback and recognize if this person's having a problem, another person's having a problem. I convene those HR directors because they don't report to me. They report to their cabinet director, their cabinet secretary. So I convene them on a regular basis to talk about all these different things that we were implementing, to get their input and their buy-in. And sometimes, and I can tell you an example later on, they would say, I mean, I can recall one meeting where I got some extreme pushback, and I leaned over to one of my assistant commissioners and said, can we just not do that right now? And she goes, yeah. And so I right then said, okay, I hear you, we're not gonna do this right now, we'll do this later, after we've had time to spend a little bit more time with you. So the listening to customers is huge. Letting them know that you genuinely care about serving them, that it's not just this is how it's going to be and we're done. I feel like that was a huge component of our success.
One of the things that I remember being there and talking with your data guy, and you know, in federal government, one of the big things is time to hire. And I said to the data guy, so what's your average time to hire? And he goes, I don't know. We don't track that. We track customer satisfaction. That's what we track. And your customer satisfaction rose significantly. It was pretty high.
Yes. And the reason we couldn't track time to hire is because it would start in our agency and end in another agency. And so I'll get into later, we began centralization of doing the shared services piece, which is going to enable us to have time to hire. And I can talk about that later. I think the last piece that's important for you all to hear, and you guys may have been doing this for years, but we really began to put a huge focus on competency and behavioral-based interviewing, and trained our supervisors in it, and said you really need to hire for key positions, you really need to utilize competency and behavioral-based interviewing. And I'll never forget sitting in, after the bill was passed, the deputy commissioner and I would go and sit in our employee appeals board, because it was a new process and they were new board members, and we just wanted to make sure everything was going well. And I remember listening to a particular case where it was a lady who worked in the parole office. She was the receptionist, and they had fired her because what she was doing was agitating the parolees when they would come in. She just got a kick. I guess that just gave her something to do. She would agitate the parolees, and by the time they got back to their parole officer, I mean, they just about wanted to fight. And so they finally fired her. And I sat and listened to the supervisor who was giving testimony, and I thought, oh, if only he'd known about competency and behavioral-based interviewing. So I went up and introduced myself to him at the break. And I asked him if he was aware, and he said, yes, ma'am. He said, I wasn't then, but I am now. And he said, we use it for all our hires. And he said, it has had such an impact that we have people come in our office and say, what are y'all doing? Because they could tell a difference in the caliber of people that they were hiring into the office. So, and then what else we were able to do as a result of the TEAM Act is actually recruit. We could not recruit because of that top 3 and top 5. It was all based on seniority. So I couldn't go to a college and recruit folks straight out of college to come to work for state government because they didn't have any experience. And when you've got a system that's based on experience, they're never going to get their foot in the door. So that's why we went to the knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies. And you're going to find I'm huge on data. And we really began tracking how many applications we were getting each and every year. And we were going along really well until about the time the economy started coming back, and then our applications began to decline. And they declined for 2 years in a row, and we said, okay, we have got to hire a recruiter or we're never going to be able to keep up with, because you all know, you deal with it every day. You're competing with the private sector. It's not typically government we're competing with for our employees. And we were fortunate enough to find someone from the private sector who's phenomenal. She's able to find, I'd never heard of things she ever, I'd never heard of Indeed or Handshake. I'm sure I'm looking over at this group because, see, you guys know, I'd never heard of that until she came in. She was great at finding opportunities vehicles to utilize that didn't cost us anything. And the metrics that she was tracking on the effectiveness of her work was phenomenal. And so, in fact, she was so successful, we had to hire another person to come in and help her. And really what I think one of the key things that the TEAM Act has done for us is we're rebranding ourselves. We're really wanting to become the employer of choice and get people excited about working for the state of Tennessee, because everything I've learned about the young people that are coming out of college right now, they're passionate. They want to make an impact and a difference. They also want to be developed. They really want to be developed. And so we've really been trying to rebrand ourselves to let people know that the state is an exciting place to work. So I'm going to transition to performance management. When I got to the state, first of all, one of the things we did was clearly define what we call executive service. And they were career service, but we really wanted that entitlement language to go away. So we thought about what should we call those who don't serve at the will. And we came up with preferred service. So executive service, they're at the highest levels. They're typically appointed. And then preferred service have the ability to appeal a termination, a demotion, or a suspension. And what I found was nobody who was in executive service was being evaluated. So the people doing the evaluations were not being evaluated. And those people who were being evaluated, 85% of them were receiving 4s and 5s on a 5-tier scale. So we should have been curing world hunger, not just hunger in Tennessee. And so we knew that we had to blow it up. So what we did was we got rid of that 5 tiers. We got rid of the numerical rating system because in my experience, we did the same thing. We implemented a new performance management system at Hamilton County government, and I thought, oh my gosh, if they'd only handed out t-shirts when they launched it and said, I'm a 3 and I'm proud of it, it would have been great. But people think a 3 is like a C. And so we blew up the numerical rating system and we went to unacceptable, which is your lowest tier, needs improvement, because that could even be a new hire. You know, when you're evaluating someone, they need improvement. They haven't quite mastered the role yet. That middle tier that everybody didn't want to be at, we had to be thoughtful about that too. We call that valued. You're a valued employee. You're doing the job we hired you to do. Advanced means you're going above and beyond what's in your performance plan. And then outstanding is the highest you can get. And in order to receive an outstanding, you have to have contributed in a measurable way to the goals of the organization. Because we all know people want to give advanced and outstanding to their favorite people. We also put, what else we tackled was we said, we're going to put a reviewer role in there. And so for instance, I was a rater, so I rated my direct reports on their performance plans, but I was a reviewer for their direct reports. And what that allowed me to do is it helped to eliminate supervisor bias. because you can look and see, they're doing the same, or they're not adequately justifying. I had to also approve, as a cabinet member, I had to approve all outstandings and all unacceptables. Again, just to make sure that we were really trying to get the objectivity, the subjectivity out of the system. I think what was the most critical thing in the bill was everyone had to have SMART goals, all the way up to cabinet level. And so, for example, the Department of Human Resources strategic and operational goals were my SMART goals. And I was evaluated by the governor on how our department did on strategic and operational goals. And my team knew this. They knew that I wasn't just evaluating them, I also was being evaluated. And you all know, if you've worked with SMART goals, they are not easy. We ultimately wanted to move to pay for performance, and we knew that in order to do that, we had to really train our supervisors on how to write SMART goals. It took us 3 years to do that. So I'm, in case you haven't figured it out yet, I'm a really optimistic person, but I knew this was not going to happen overnight. And we even had to bring in outside coaches to help us do that. They would go, for instance, to the Department of Correction, where you can have all of your correctional officers basically with the same work outcomes. You can't do that on all levels, but there are certain classifications where everybody can have the same work outcomes because they struggle to write them. I know we would have attorneys who would say, you can't write SMART outcomes for attorneys. Our chief learning officer helped the deputy governor sit down and write SMART work outcomes, for him and his assistant. So it can be done. It is not easy, but it can be done. But what ultimately happened, and Steve mentioned that this took us a while. Putting SMART work outcomes in the bill was critical to making it happen. But what we were able to do was align those work outcomes with the governor's priorities, and he had 5 key priorities, and then the agency's strategic and operational goals, and we put that in the performance management system. So you as an employee can see, for instance, the 2 that our department always aligned with was education and workforce development. And that's what HR does. We do education and workforce development. Well, that was one of the governor's key priorities. And of course, he was doing it statewide. We were doing it for state employees. And then effective and efficient government. If you can't contribute to that, you don't need to be in the role. So a lot of ours was, if it wasn't being driven by education and workforce development, it was education and effective and efficient government. And the employees could see that. They could see all of our strategic and operational goals for the department, and they could see the governor's priorities, and they could see how their outcomes were contributing to that. And I think that's what really brought the success, because it was alignment from the top down. And employees knowing that it isn't just me doing this. My boss at the top of the department is being evaluated on what's expected of her as well. So we paid for performance. So the bill was effective October 1st, 2012. We did not pay for performance until January of 2016 because it took us that long. The research we did, we worked with the Hay Group around pay for performance, and they said you've got to practice it. Because if you implement pay for performance and those work outcomes aren't right, it's just going to be a hot mess. And so we went out and audited them. We do random audits every year, and it gets exciting because we can show agencies, look, your goals are this much smarter this year, because it's that whole continuous improvement mentality, recognizing you may not get it 100% right the first time, because none of us are perfect, and it takes time. And I've had supervisor after supervisor tell me, getting performance management right is the best thing we ever did, because it's so great. I get better at it every year. I get better at writing my outcomes. It's easier for me to have conversations with my employees. And that was another thing I didn't talk about. We were rating people once a year. Don't even bother. If you're going to do it once a year, it's crazy. So we said, going back to remembering that employee who said, my supervisor won't talk to me, we said, okay, they're going to talk to him at least 4 times a year. We're going to make them talk to him at least 4 times a year. So that first conversation is setting those expectations with the work outcomes. You're sitting down with that employee and saying, and the higher up I will tell you, the higher the employee, my direct reports wrote their own work outcomes and brought them to me. That's really what you'd love to have. I've had consultants tell me, well, the frontline people should do it too. Y'all know frontline people can't do that, but you can start with helping them. And so making sure that those were in place was critical to our success. When we realized, in fact, we got complaints from the State Employee Association and the legislature, because we had them go ahead and score, we just weren't paid, okay? So we had employees saying, well, I can't get above a 3. And it was all I could do to say, it's not a 3 anymore, it's valued. But what we realized was our supervisors, and I know y'all have this, we promoted people into supervisory positions so they could get a raise, and they didn't like people.
That's never happened.
So our supervisors had not been properly equipped to be supervisors. And you know, this happens in the private sector too. We have put a huge focus on learning and development, and I'm coming to that next, but we really had to come back and equip our supervisors with, we launched, the first was, we had the SMART coaching. Well, then we came back and we created Get Smarter. And it was really to equip the supervisors to coach their employees to higher performance. Because we had employees saying, well, just tell me what I need to do to get valued, and I'll do, or to get advanced, and I'll do it. And I thought, if I have to tell you what you have to do to get advanced or outstanding, then there's a problem with that. I want people on the team who are innovative and creative and are coming to me with these great things and going, look what I did, and I did this, and yeah, this was what, I did everything in my performance plan, but oh, wow, check out this that I did. And so we had to convince the legislature that we couldn't be prescriptive about these work outcomes. We wrote them to the valued level. And I think that was important too, because what they had been doing before we blew it up and started over is they were telling supervisors, write it to that highest level. How many supervisors do you think know how to write write work outcomes to the highest level? They only know how to write it to what they're expected to do because that's the job description. So that's what we did. We said write it to, those work outcomes are written to a valued level. And then we do have, for those where there's metrics, clear metrics, we can even put in there, okay, if you do this much, there are times where you can do that. If you do this much, you can get advanced, and if you do this much, you get outstanding, but it's not always the case because those are typically written to a valued level. And so we came back and coached we made every single supervisor. That's what else was great about having a governor and cabinet who were on board with all this. They supported anytime we wanted to make things mandatory like this. Every supervisor had to Get Smarter because we wanted them to sit down and just start having conversations with their employees about, because you want to get them to think about what they should be doing. You don't want to have to tell them. People who supervise people love to have those innovative folks that are inspirational and come in with their own ideas. You don't want to have to always be telling everybody what to do. So I think that was really important. And the last thing we did in the last year, in 2018, we kind of did a survey of different levels of performance management. We surveyed employees, we surveyed supervisors, we surveyed what we call performance management coordinators, because we had someone in each agency who it was their job to make sure that the performance ratings were in on time at both because I mentioned you got the conversation one is setting the expectations. Then we had 2 interim discussions, and we had deadlines for those. You weren't doing a rating. It was just, hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can help you with? Are you making progress? So it was just those check-ins on how those work outcomes were coming along. And then the final discussion was the actual rating itself. And so we surveyed employees, supervisors, performance coordinators, and what we learned was employees didn't like that the only time they got to give feedback was at the very end of the cycle after they've been rated. And so we changed it to where at both interims and at the final rating, employees give their comments first. Best thing we ever did. Because it gives employees the opportunity to brag. Remember, I did this. Remember this. And supervisors can't keep up with all that. So employees really, really loved that we did that. We also, in 2018, began adding, I had cabinet members coming to me saying, okay, I've got employees who are blowing their goals out of the water, but they're killing everybody in the process. They can't get along with people. And I have to give them an outstanding because they did great work, but they don't care about the impact they have on everybody else. They wanted competencies introduced into the process. So we took baby steps, and we introduced customer focus, because back as a result of the survey that I mentioned, where almost half of the responses were about our employment practices, the committee that the Commissioner of Finance started with a handful of cabinet members was called Customer Focused Government. And what we realized was, if we're not focusing on the end customer, we're not going to get the results that we're after. And they were talking about, it was ironic because the Department of Economic and Community Development had done a survey about regulations. They were trying to survey their customers to say, okay, tell us about basically what regulations frustrate you. What they got back was how horrible customer service was from their team members. And so the Commissioner of Finance said, sounds like we need to do some customer service training. Well, ironically, our Chief Learning Officer was developing a curriculum based on 1 minute service, Disney's model. And so we made it mandatory for every state employee to be trained in customer focus. And it could be configured to each agency, because customer service in each agency is different. And so that was the first competency that we said every single employee is going to be rated on, is customer focus, because they've all been trained in it. If you're going to rate them, you got to make sure that you're not giving them something that's impossible to achieve. And what the cabinet wanted then for supervisors was developing direct reports. And so we had to create a curriculum for developing direct reports, because most supervisors think, and those of you that, if you think back to when you were a new supervisor, it was really hard to realize it's not about me anymore. It's about the team that I lead, and inspiring them and guiding them. And so we created a curriculum called Developing Direct Reports and Others that helps supervisors realize what their role is as a supervisor. You want to be developing people to move on up. Not everybody wants to, we know this, but it is a supervisor's responsibility to develop their people. And so many of our supervisors did not get that. These were the ones that had been promoted to supervisor because they wanted a pay raise. And I will tell you, out of someone in here, Peter, I think, knew Commissioner Martineau, who was our Commissioner of Environment Conservation. He came to us and said, we've got almost a 1-to-1 ratio of supervisor to employee. Could we create, because they've been promoting people, he's got a lot of engineers, and he said, we'd like to create a dual track system. And so we did. We sat down with him and created the technical track, and you could actually promote in the technical track. Once you got to that highest level, you had to be mentoring employees, and then we had the supervisory track, and we made people apply for those jobs. And we had so many people that said, I'm going over here to the technical side. I love the work I do. I really don't want to deal with the people aspect of it. So I think that's really important too, is recognizing that that not everybody wants to lead, but those that do, you've got to give them the tools to be effective leaders.
Rebecca, where did the compensation come in? Was that before or after you dealt with the performance?
The compensation, that's a great question, because remember, the bill was effective October 1st, 2012. As soon as we launched the bill, we were doing a pretty comprehensive, maybe the largest one the state had ever done, a salary study with Mercer. Mercer came in and did a study for us, and we were so far behind because the state had gone, at least when the recession hit, the state had gone at least 3 years without giving raises. In fact, the last study they had done in 2008, they never got to fully implement it. So they came in and did a study for us, and when the results came back, we said, okay, how can we impact the most employees with the dollars that we have in place? And we made the determination that if you were at midpoint or above, and midpoint was, we determined was market, so if you were at midpoint of your range or above, you would not receive any of the market adjustment. 86% of state employees got, on the average, 4.75% increase. And that was our first step into market and performance-based pay, because we implemented that study in July of 2013. The following year, we had to continue, because someone asked me earlier about across-the-board raises. We had to continue the across-the-board raises until we were ready to pay for performance. But once we began paying for performance, what would typically happen is in January, because our cycle ended September 30th, our performance management cycle. So once it ended, you had to have time to calibrate, to find out how many people are valued, how many advanced and outstanding, because you were not eligible for pay for performance if you weren't at least a valued employee. And that was in our regulations. And so you have to determine how many are at each of those levels, how much money is it going to take. And we were also deliberate about making sure that we differentiated between those levels. So by the time we fine-tuned it, if you're valued or above, you'd get a certain % increase. And then the last 2 or 3 years, we would give bonuses, one-time bonuses to advanced and outstanding. And the beauty of that is it's more financially sustainable because it's not being added to your base. And it also sends a message that it has to be earned every year. So it was pretty popular because in January we would do the pay for performance, and then if there were any market adjustments, we did those in July. And back when there was the scare of the Fair Labor Standards increase to the, y'all know it was going to go, it was almost going to double, and then at the last minute it got canceled. We actually chose that year just to go ahead and give anyone who was not already at $25,000, get them up to $25,000, and the most we would give anybody was 4%. That was pretty impactful, and you can imagine, especially for legislators who are worried about some of your lower paid employees, like your correctional officers and folks that are your cafeteria type folks. That was a huge thing. So we really tried to be thoughtful about let's have some money, and I really like it better than my first foray into market performance-based pay. We had a matrix where it was all combined into one. If you separate them, it clearly it sends the message to those people when it comes time for pay for performance that if they're not performing at that value level, they're not getting an increase. They might get a market adjustment, but that's because the market has moved. And so I think it's nice to differentiate them. So we would historically, now we're paying for performance in January and doing any market adjustments in July. And I think that helps significantly. So learning and development, one of my favorite topics. When our chief learning officer came to the state, she started out as a training officer, and she started asking a lot of questions, and we're both big believers in asking questions to help you understand why things are done the way they're done. And she found out that we had just basically a catalog or a vault of cookie cutter training opportunities. And the training was being driven by employees, because she asked someone, well, how many customers do we have? And they said 44,000. And she said, so there's 6 of us serving 44,000 people. How does that work? And she quickly realized it has to be driven at the top. Learning and development has to be driven at the top. So she began meeting with agency heads and talking to them about their learning and development needs. And one of the things that we did in the TEAM Act was codify in the bill that learning and development is the purview of the Department of Human Resources. Because what we found was we would have Children's Services teaching coaching one way and Human Services teaching it another way. None of it was aligned. It certainly wasn't aligned with the governor's priorities. So we said, okay, all professional learning and development, not technical, but all professional learning and development is going to belong to the Department of Human Resources. And our chief learning officer pretty much creates all the curriculum, she and her team, which I think is great because it allows you, even when necessary, to customize it to an agency. And so in 2012, right about in fact, the bill was almost through session, is when I realized that when I got to the state, the chief learning officer did not report to me. There was a layer between us. And I realized the more I heard about the impact that she was beginning to have with learning and development in the agencies, that position needed to report directly to me. So I named her chief learning officer and had her report directly to me. And what's been phenomenal about it is the focus that we had put on learning and development. Again, I love data. We realized that she was keeping up with not only the relevancy, because she does surveys after everything she does. She surveys the participants. And she doesn't just survey for smiley faces. She wants to know, was it relevant? How was the presenter? Did they do a good job? And always with that concept, that mindset of continuous improvement. And so what we realized, we were seeing that she was impacting more and more and more employees as she got into each agency. And you could see on the graph how there was a huge focus on learning and development. And we kept hearing people saying, well, if it wasn't for Lead Tennessee, or if it wasn't for the Tennessee Government Executive Institute, or the Commissioner's Leadership Academy, I wouldn't have gotten this promotion. And so we kept hearing all this anecdotal feedback about the fact that the learning and development was resulting in people getting promoted. So I said, well, let's just run promotions. It was beautiful. It correlated exactly with the focus on learning and development, because as we develop people, it prepared them to step up into that next leadership role. And I think what we forget about in government, we all know everything we do when it comes to employees has to be competitive. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So we say, well, we can't develop people for a role. You actually can. You can develop them for a leadership role. It doesn't have to be a specific leadership role, but you can develop them to step into leadership. And so she began to put this huge focus on leadership development. When I stepped into the role, we had Lead Tennessee, which had just been started the year before. Lead Tennessee is, I've never seen anything like it before. We got about 125 people that have to compete, have to apply to be in the program. It's a year-long program. They take a 360 at the beginning on the leadership competencies that they're going to study. And it's things like courageous. I love it, because courage is hard. You know, it's tough to tell people no, or to tell people it's not how we behave. Innovation. That was one of our competencies. Mission-driven, customer-focused. So talent-focused. Again, getting people to think about. It's no longer just about you when you step into a leadership role. So we customized with one of our partners a 360 instrument. Each person would take a 360 at the beginning of Lead Tennessee on where they rated on those competencies, and then they would take it again at the end. And in the meantime, they were assigned executive coaches. How many people get to have an executive coach in the public sector that actually you can go and talk to about issues you're dealing with, that helps you think through how to get better? We have now had, Lead Tennessee started in 2010, and they were starting their 10th year this year with Lead Tennessee, and it's hugely popular. And then we had Tennessee Government Executive Institute, Tennessee Government Management Institute, both of which were in partnership with the University of Tennessee. And I will tell y'all, universities love to partner with the public sector to develop people. And those were both residential. So those were the three that we had. And by the time the administration ended, we had a total of 5 statewide leadership programs, because those are statewide. We send it out to every agency and let them, we select people based on the size of the agency. So the largest agency in Tennessee state government is correction, no surprise. And they would get the most spots because we'd allocate it based on their size. And then we also, what we found was we'd have cabinet members come to us and saying, well, Lead Tennessee is great. I'm seeing an impact on my employees for Lead Tennessee, the Executive Institute, and the Management Institute, but I can't send enough people through it. What else can we do? So we created, in fact, I kind of started it because my first year in, when I got there, my Lead Tennessee folks had already been selected. They'd had orientation right before we got there. So in the fall of 2011, I sent out applications to the team and got 9 applications for Lead Tennessee, and I had 2 slots. And I looked at the Chief Learning Officer and I said, well, so this is bittersweet. So I'm excited that I have this many people that want to grow and develop, but only 2 slots? And she goes, well, we could start our own leadership academy. I said, okay, well, talk to me about that. And we created the Next Level Leadership Academy based on the principles of Good to Great. It was kind of like a mini Lead Tennessee, because we had Lead Tennessee, they meet every other month, and it's an all-day summit, and it's exhausting because Trish, our learning officer, she has it, We have current and emerging leaders in it, and that's great because you've got younger folks learning from seasoned folks and vice versa, because the younger ones teach us too, believe me. And so what was really great about it was when we sent out the applications, we said, okay, we're going to create this, and so I sent out what I call so sorry letters. And I said, I'm so sorry, but you were not selected because it was so competitive. However, because of the demand, we're going to create our own leadership academy and watch for the announcement soon. And now, y'all won't believe this, but there was a rumor going around it was the Reject Academy. And that's all our chief learning officer needed to hear, because she said, I am bringing it. It is so popular. They just launched the 7th year of it, and we continue to have more applications. This was in our own department, so it was for our own department, more applications than we had slots. And there are now, that was the first one, there's now 25 of those across Tennessee state government, because word spread and every commissioner wants their own leadership academy. And again, we partner with universities to help us with those, but our chief learning officer has team members that are certified facilitators that will go out and teach a lot of those. And I cannot tell you how many people will come up to me and say, I can't tell you what it means to know that the state of Tennessee cares enough about me to let me come to this. And they had to compete for those too. We made them apply. That's one thing you heard Steve say a while ago. Our chief learning officer said, don't send me your fixer-uppers. I want people who are excited about learning and development. They're not just coming to this to get out of work. So they really have to be, those applications were extremely competitive.
And they go through, your chief learning officer's team actually sends them through an interview process. It's not like your supervisor just signs off and says you can go to this. They have to go through a process to be selected.
Yes. So I think another thing that's really important to talk about when it comes to leadership development is our first year in, so this was even before the TEAM Act. This was at the end of 2011. The learning officer wanted to have an annual leadership, she wanted to start an annual leadership conference for alumni of those statewide leadership programs. And we had about 200 and maybe 50 people that first year, 225, 250. And she's a big collaborator too. She brought together folks from several different agencies to kind of say, what are we going to study? What's this going to consist of? And they came up with 5 themes. I know one is communication, one is system thinking. There were 5 themes that they came up with, and I just got to come and just listen because it was so well done, and everyone that came, and it was from all across, actually our programs across all 3 branches, because we have people, even though the other 2 branches don't want to follow our policies, they want the leadership, they want the learning and development, and we don't say no to them. We take them with open arms. But it was such a great conference, and everybody was so excited, because if you ever meet our learning officer, you don't come to one of her sessions and just sit there. She's going to have you engaged and interacting. And I remember thinking, I remember at the end of the day, it was when I got up just to close, I thought, this can't stop. This was so exciting to see how engaged all these were leaders from across all branches, all agencies. And so I promised them that I was going to share what they developed, because one of the things that jumped out at me was they were so frustrated with the fact that government employees always get dumped on in the media. They don't care about the great things we've done. They always want to focus on the negative because it sells. And they said, we've really got to we're so proud of the work that we do. We've got to be better at sharing the work that we do and communicating that. And so I promised them that I would not let this end. And I went to the governor's chief of staff and said, we'd like to create a council, a leadership council that could be a think tank for the governor's office that would also be a resource for our department, because we're a small department, to really drive leadership development across the state. And so again, we made them apply. We sent out an announcement, said we're going to create the Tennessee Government Leadership Council. Here's the application. The application is usually what will you contribute? What do you hope to get out of it? But it's making them think about why they want to be a part of it. And what has come out of that council, it's just been phenomenal. I would brag on them every time. They meet every month with our chief learning officer, and it's all agencies. So it's grown to about 40 people now. But they actually, they first of all, a key thing is they collectively come up with what that leadership conference is going to look like every year. We're up to over 600 people that come to the leadership conference. They also created a leadership black belt program, which I think you could probably find in the brochure. In fact, I think
it's in there.
Yeah, it's in there. I sent that to Alex, and he graciously put that in there for me. They also created a leadership book club, and the book club is so popular. Our department hosts it. They're studying leadership books, and it fills up once the email goes out that it's coming. It fills up within 30 minutes. And they had to create. There's now 4 leadership book clubs because it's so popular. And what we quickly realized from all this is, most people are in their program areas slaving away, whether it's human services, children's services, correction, you name it, and they're not feeding their souls. And this was feeding their souls. And everybody would study the same book, and then they'd come in and talk about it. And someone would lead the discussion, and it is hugely popular. In fact, what's happened as a result of that is now we have book clubs in agencies. Because somebody will go back and go, oh my gosh, this has been so impactful, I'm going to go start one of my own agency, which is phenomenal. So you decide, what book do I want to study? We buy the books for them, because that's important, buy the books. And then what else they created was for the state of Tennessee, a Toastmasters Club. Because we had people that are in leadership roles that aren't comfortable getting up and talking in front of people. And so we've got our own Toastmasters Club, and that's really fun to go and watch it too. So it's just for state of Tennessee employees. It's a kind of a safe place. Everybody, is there for the same reason. And then they also started a leadership lunch and learn series. And the lunch and learn series is once a month. They host, you bring your own lunch, and they bring in an executive. So I've spoken at it before. We'll have different cabinet members. We've had the chief operating officer for the state come. It's bringing in leaders that otherwise they might not get exposed to. Because, you all know this, how many cabinet secretaries, their employees have actually met them? It just doesn't typically happen, all their employees, it does not happen. And so to give folks an opportunity to hear from leaders about their leadership journey is pretty phenomenal. And all of this is stuff we would not have thought of on our own. But when you collaborate and give other folks the opportunity to share their ideas, it's amazing what can happen.
Rebecca, let me ask you a question. With all and I know you've got a lot more to go.
Well, this is the last topic for the Team Act.
But with all the changes that have, from compensation to performance management to training and development and employee review and all these things, how did the employees react to all this? The rank and file react to all this? Was it a lot for them to absorb, or did they come along with it?
I think most of them, to be frank, I don't think most of them realized at first what was going on. Those that were members of the State Employee Association did, and I've shared with a couple of you, they represent less than 30% of state employees, and it's usually the blue-collar workers. That's who becomes a member of the State Employee Association. So I don't think most of them even knew what was happening. What they're reacting to now is the pay for performance, the market adjustments, all the great stuff. The learning and development is just huge. People are just eating it up. That's been really exciting to see, that people do want to grow and develop. I think another one that was really exciting for us, I mentioned the reason that we put learning and development underneath the chief learning officer was because we kept having random trainings going on that weren't aligned with anything. Well, believe it or not, that was still happening to some degree. And the chief learning officer comes to me and she's all frustrated. And she goes, I just don't know what to do about it. And I said, well, so we've been convening the HR officers every month to help align them with what it is we're trying to do in state government and get their input. What if you convene the #1 person responsible for learning and development in each agency? Because there's always one, even if it's just for technical training. You all know this. Everybody's got somebody who drives learning and development in their agency. I said, what if you started convening them monthly? Oh my gosh. Those people were, you thought they died and gone to heaven. They were so excited. Again, I think because there was somebody else interested in what they do. And you know, learning and development, a lot of times it just gets kind of pushed over here, or it just gets cut. And so Tricia's great about, I call her a master facilitator, and she led them through, oh, I forgot what she calls it now, but it's where she passes out Post-it notes, and everybody puts down their top three things that they think are keeping them from being effective in their role. And what surfaced in that very first meeting was that they all, as a rule, said the people that work for us are talking heads. They don't know how to teach adult learners. They just come in and wah, 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 and nobody cares. They said, we need a how to facilitate certification. So I said, well, great, that's exciting. So go forth and prosper. So she creates we partnered with Vanderbilt University to create how to facilitate certification. And probably 6 months later, she comes and she goes, well, we got a problem. And I said, okay, what is it? She said, only about 38% of the people are passing this, which validated what they were telling us, that we got a bunch of talking heads that are trying to teach adult learners. And I said, okay, so we don't want to lower the bar. What can we do to help them get there? And so she and her team created fundamentals of certification. It wasn't mandatory, but it was an extra tool if available to you if you wanted to take it. So then all of a sudden we're at 83% of people are passing it. And we had people who never facilitated learning and development before who wanted to be a part of it because they realized, they heard from their peers, that actually helps me in making presentations to my boss. And so we have now certified, she started off with just a handful, and now I think there's like 700 certified facilitators in the state of Tennessee, and we won't let you teach our curriculum if you're not certified to facilitate. And people will brag about it. Oh my gosh, that was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm so proud I did it. You know, and it's typically an all-day class, and they really teach you how to get up, what you're supposed to do if you're going to facilitate a learning opportunity, and it's not just to, bore people to death. So that was really exciting, and from that has come another annual conference. We host a conference every year for the learning and development facilitators, and they love it. It's focused exclusively on them. We also created, and this is in your packet as well, we realized when our chief operating officer came on board, the governor hired him in July of 2013. He's great because he helps to just help people think of the state as an enterprise, not just being your silos of your own agency. But what I'm doing is probably going to impact you as well. And he asked us about the training that we're doing for supervisors. So what are we doing for supervisors? And we realized we had quite a bit, but there wasn't really a framework for it. And about that same time that our CIO came and said, I want to start a technical track for our IT people, but I'd like a leadership track bumped up against it. Can you help me with that? And the light went off with the chief learning officer. We could create a leadership and management pyramid for supervisors, and it's a 4-level certificate program. So the lowest level, it's the compliance stuff. It's got everything about the performance management. It's got respectful workplace, sexual harassment. That's where our customer service curriculum is. Everything that we say you have to do is in that lower, that first level, and all supervisors have to do it. But the top 3 are voluntary. And I'm telling you, the chief operating officer, he'll come up to a leader and he'll say, well, where are you on the pyramid? Are you at level 4 yet? It's amazing what competition does, because people are getting really excited about who's going to be the first person in my agency to get to level 4 on the pyramid. And it's in your handout. But what it says to me again is there's a hunger for learning and development. And I just don't think until this administration there was a focus on it that needed to be there, because we're seeing the impact of it. And then I mentioned in the top 5 surprises the fact that HR was not centralized, and there wasn't really a focus on HR being developed as competencies. And so we created a 3 pillars of human resources. It again is a certificate program. Level 1 is the strategic role of HR, it's a half day. Level 2 is the legal role of HR, and level 3 is like the employee life cycle. And every single HR person pretty much has taken that in the state, and they're excited about it. And it's just to raise the awareness of what is HR's role, along with tools that are in there. And y'all, I haven't told you this yet, but anything that we have, and I spoke with the current commissioner of human resources, told him I was coming. I said, so you may get some calls or emails from people wanting things. And that's what I love about public service we share. You know, there's no copyrights, anything. If we can help each other, that's what it's all about. So first we created the 3 pillars of HR, and people got really excited about that. And then we had folks saying, well, I want something, what's next? And so we created the HR Master Series that's based on the SHRM and IPMA HR competencies. And it also is a year-long program that you have to apply for. And so we started off with HR directors, and every HR director in the state has been through it, and they love it. Because we only have about 15 people come in at a time, and they build a little network, and they're learning together. And I love sitting through those because I learn. I try to go to as many of these as I could, and I would learn from them about the issues that they're dealing with on the front line. So it's really that continuous learning mindset, getting folks excited about learning, but you got to make it relevant. You know, it can't just be the check the box. It's got to be relevant to their needs, and that's where it's important to start with that agency head or whoever's responsible for learning and development, someone at a pretty high level that knows what those needs are that are going to help drive that agency forward. So I'm going to stop there. That gets me through the TEAM Act. I'll tell you what else I want to cover, but I want to see what questions you all have. I want to talk a little bit more about our total compensation focus. I want to talk about data-driven decision making, and I want to talk about our shared services initiative.
Questions? Here comes
I think Alex is-
John has one down here.
This is such a small group. Do we need a microphone?
Yeah, we
Well,
do.
because we're recording it.
I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Judy England Joseph. I'm a fellow. Could you have done all of this if the governor had a 4-year term and didn't get reelected?
Well, let's think about that. So 11, we wouldn't have paid for performance yet. Yeah, because we didn't pay for performance until 2016. And he was in office 11, 12, 13, 14. But here's my counter to that, because I'm always going to bring the positive. In Tennessee, every 8 years the governor changed. I mean, they serve. You're right. They serve 4 years and then they get reelected. And ever since there's been 2 4-year terms available to a governor, they have been reelected. So, but I understand why you're asking.
Yeah. It's really hard to keep up momentum for a really great idea, and you really do have to have leadership and commitment at the very top.
So what I would say to you is maybe don't start as big as we did. You know, and that's one thing that I've learned is find some place to start, and then share the bright spots. Focus on the bright spots. Focus on those successes and share them with others, because that's motivational for everyone else. So you've got to figure out, what could I do? What's reasonable to accomplish? And what could have the most impact? Reasonable to accomplish and have the most impact within 4 years.
I think sustainability,
Absolutely.
almost no matter what, no matter how small, how great,
Absolutely.
it is something that's really difficult for us.
Alex, you have a question here, and then there's one over there. Oh, sorry.
They're passing by.
I'm just seeing hands go up, so. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, I'm Peter Levine, as I spoke to you earlier. You have some good ideas there on compensation. If I understand them correctly, you have 2 different adjustments. One is a market adjustment, which is in the summer, and one is a performance adjustment. And the market adjustment is essentially if you're below the median market, you go up, you get an allocation that helps you move move up toward the
Yeah,
market.
I like that you said that, because people thought immediately everybody was going to be at market, and that can't happen. You all know this, because you just don't have the money.
Right.
But it was to begin to move
Right.
people.
And the performance adjustment, if you're at least valued, then
Yes.
you get a
Yes.
performance adjustment.
Yes,
My question is, and there are bonuses for people who exceed the value.
Yes.
Okay. My question is, did that pay structure require more pay than you would have had otherwise under the previous system, or was there a greater investment in employees, or was it just a different distribution of the pay?
I would say both, because again, our governor, he was all about the employees, and he said the team with the best players wins, and so we have got to get compensation to where we can compete. And back to the data-driven decision-making, we were able to graphically show that during the 8 years of his administration, we raised the average annual salary, and that's taking everybody from the highest pay to the lowest pay, by $10,000 in 8 years. So, and he was really proud of that, because there was only 1 year during his administration that employees did not get raised.
Thank you.
Got one down here with John, and then I know there's one over here.
Hi, thanks, Rebecca. John Pogbuta, former federal HR and Napa fellow. Could you talk a little bit? You mentioned in passing, making some changes to the appeal system
Yes.
for employees, and that kind of deals with that issue. You also mentioned earlier where managers saying, "Well, I can't fire anybody."
Yes.
So how did you deal with that? And then on a tangent to that, I'm sure you found that you had at least a small percentage of your supervisors, managers that, themselves were not where you needed them to be. And if you could not develop them into what you needed them to be, how did you outplace someone who did not deserve to be a supervisor?
Great question. We had in place a grievance procedure. You could grieve anything. And what we wanted to do was put the focus where it needed to be, and that was on the only thing you were going to be able to grieve, and we actually took grieve out, we call it appeal, was a suspension, a demotion, or a termination. You couldn't even appeal your performance rating. You could appeal whether if the process wasn't done. So for instance, if the supervisor failed to do an interim 1 or 2, you could appeal that, but we would not allow them to appeal their rating, because everybody would, or a lot of people would. And so what we did is said, okay, it's going to be, we also had a civil service commission that we wiped out, because what we realized in that listening tour, that's where I kept hearing from supervisors, we can't fire people. And it was a combination of the Civil Service Commission and our administrative law judges, because the administrative law judges were the ones that presided over it. So we said, they're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have an employee appeals board that's appointed by the governor. And the administrative law judge is only going to be there to rule on law, facts and law. And so we narrowed it down from a 6-step process to a 3-step process. Step 1 is you appeal to the appointing authority. So if you're in correction and you've been demoted, suspended, or terminated, you appeal to the commissioner of correction. And they have actually a step 1 appeal process. And that was something else we really focused on. We wanted it to be a conversation. We didn't want it to be a hearing, because that was the challenge. Was we didn't want it to be a hearing till that highest level. We wanted that employee to have the opportunity to come in and sit down. It's usually not with the commissioner, it's with their designee, but to say, here's where you guys got it wrong. This is what happened. We wanted them, and I would tell people, this is your opportunity to show us something we don't know about. What's going to make us change our mind? That's what you're here for. What did we get wrong? What's going to make us change our mind? And then I was a little stunned to find out that human resources, we were called Big HR. Big HR wasn't even in that process. So that was bad, because us not being in it meant we couldn't make sure that discipline was being administered equitably and consistently across the state. So we put me as the commissioner of HR at step 2, and it was a paper review, because we knew there was no way that I could sit and listen to all these people. But what was great about it was it let us look at it from an objective viewpoint, because it's not our employee. Where it got interesting was when it was our employee, and then we'd have to have another commissioner get involved. But that was really helpful, because what I would do at step 2 is if it just wasn't making sense, like, I mean, why did the agency do this? I'd pick up the phone and I would call the commissioner and say, okay, here's what I'm not understanding. Can you help me understand it? And either they would tell me something I didn't know about their operations, like things that happen behind the wall and correction, or things that can't go behind the wall and correction, or I would convince them over to my way of thinking. But I would always pick up the phone and call them before I made that decision. And mine was a paper decision that went back to the employee and to the agency. And then that final step was to that Board of Appeals that was appointed by the governor, and they were citizens. So we had attorneys, we had HR people, we had business people who were kind of excited about it. They would actually come in, and it was a de novo hearing, and they would hear from the employee, they'd hear from the agency and ask questions, and then they would rule right there on the spot. And it cut down the grievances like crazy. Now, knowing that what we learned was a lot of times grievances are relational things. So we created a mediation program and trained mediators across the state, and would encourage people, go to mediation. Now sometimes both parties had to agree. There was one time where we actually said, you know what, we're going to make this person go to mediation because of just the whole situation. But the mediation helped tremendously, because a lot of times people just need to get together and talk. That wasn't happening. And so that was actually done after the TEAM Act. We created the mediation process, and it was really successful. We would have, whenever possible, 2 mediators. So if it was the Department of Human Services employee, we'd have a Department of Correction mediator and a Department of Children's Services mediator, somebody else, a neutral third party. And that has been really, really successful.
You put time limits on it as well.
Yes, we did put parameters on it too. It has to have, so employee has 14 days to file the first level appeal. They have another 14 days to file the second level appeal. And we came back and changed it too, because what I was finding at step 2 is employees would send the same thing to me at step 2 that they'd sent to their commissioner at step 1. I'm like, you haven't told me anything different. So we said, look, if you don't put a statement in there at step 2 that's something else besides what you put in step 1, we're going to automatically deny it. And State Employee Association went along with us on that. And then we had 30 days. I mean, we had 30 days to make our decision, and then the Board of Appeals had to have it done within 120 days, because we had some that were out there for 3 years. And so that was really helpful to streamline the appeals process. And what happened was, because you had a board making the decision, they weren't overturning agency decisions nearly as often as before. So we began to get supervisors more comfortable with firing people. And especially when every time I would hear one, I would say, okay, I'll always I want to see their performance ratings. I want to see those performance evaluations. And when you could see where the supervisor had documented, then that just helped our case. If they hadn't, that's when I was picking up the phone and calling the commissioner and saying, they're saying they've done all, they're a horrible employee, but they gave them valued or advanced on their performance rating. So it really
Again,
helped.
it never happens in federal government.
I know, I'm sure.
So from a data viewpoint, did you actually see the number of successful terminations increase?
Yes. Yeah, people would come up again and thank me for actually helping put a process in place that would actually help them terminate people. Another thing we did was created a performance coaching curriculum, because it would help, it was kind of situational. It would help supervisors. They would do role play, because supervisors, that's hard. I mean, again, it takes courage to sit down and say, you're not cutting it. And so we kept focusing on equipping supervisors with the tools they needed to do their jobs effectively. And the performance coaching was really, really popular to help them deal with problem employees. Because it was really to get the employee to change their behavior or to reinforce positive behavior. Because you you're hoping you could talk about the good stuff they're doing, and now let's talk about what needs to change.
Did you end up then removing a few supervisors as well?
Yes, oh yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Other questions before she goes on? Michael?
So, big focus on employee development, so training courses, coaches. So when you step back, it sounds to me like a significant investment by the state in the workforce. Right? So Peter asked about salaries, so salaries went up, right? So you know, you would say probably a net increase relative to, you know, the prior trajectory of investment in people. So two questions. One is that correct, that, you know, this was a net plus investment in the people of the Tennessee state government? And the second is, did you have mechanisms to see outcomes in government service so that you could explain to the citizens of Tennessee the return on that investment?
Yes. Definitely a marked increase in investing in employees, not only from the, to your point, from the compensation perspective, but from learning and development. Because if you think about it, we had 3 statewide leadership development programs in the beginning, and there were 5 at the end, plus 25 you know, agency-specific leadership academies. And the outcomes were not only evidenced in the performance management system, but we would periodically survey managers and say, can you see a marked improvement in this person since they went through this program? And we would get people to respond to that. So, and I think the other thing is, again, starting at the top with your focus on learning and development, because if the leader doesn't support it, they're not going to make the investment. Just like if you've got supervisors that don't believe it, they're not going to let their people go. So you've got to have, and I would encourage you to find, anytime I was starting something new, I'd say, okay, who's going to get excited about this, and who could I go talk to first? I was always looking for champions for everything I wanted to do. And because if I could pilot something, I'm big on piloting things. Pilot something with an agency that I know is going to get excited about it and champion it, and then word spreads. And in fact, with us, it became a competition. Wait a minute, you did what with what agency? I went in. That's where the leadership academies came from. Wait, what are you doing? I want to do that. And so that's why to the question you asked, I think you've got to think about what can I do that could have pretty great impact, but I could accomplish it in a reasonable amount of time and it would sustain. And it's really hard to turn off the employee engagement. I mean, if you talk with folks at the state of Tennessee, they will tell you they love working there because they feel that I said my goal, in fact, I had someone introduce me as I was sitting next to the comptroller for the state, he's the auditor, and they said he was the money cop, and he introduced me as the HR cop, and I said, no. I said, my role is to create an environment where employees can develop and thrive. You got to get the transactions and compliance right, but it's about creating an environment that people want to be a part of, that they just get, I want people excited coming to work every day.
So, do the citizens of Tennessee see a more effective government?
Yes. In fact, what's been kind of cool lately is I'm seeing more and more tweets of citizens actually sharing, they're bragging on employees, and then the agencies are tweeting about it. You know, thank you, this person, I couldn't believe how the phenomenal customer service they gave me. So that's pretty exciting. We're actually seeing that whole communication piece that I was hearing about in the beginning, where, you know, all they talk about is the bad stuff we do that's not intentional. We want to brag about the good stuff. That's actually starting to happen. And one great example is the governor. He was so great. He thought, what's the one area we could transform that impacts almost every Tennessee citizen? See if y'all can think what that would be. What? No. DMV. DMV. I mean, you would hear horror stories about the DMV. And so they started, after we passed the TEAM Act, hiring people based on knowledge, skills, and abilities to run them, people who had customer service backgrounds. And then began to automate the processes, putting in where you could actually do a kiosk somewhere. That we can actually publish the feedback that we've gotten on that, and there's results around it. So you have to think about what, you have to think that I love that example because it touches almost every Tennessee citizen. And if you can positively impact an area like that, again, what happened there was other cabinet members are going, well, I need to be thinking about what I can do in my agency. I mean, there's a competition that starts going because you want to have bragging rights too.
What's the essential difference between the employees association that you dealt with and an employee union other than collective bargaining agreements? What function does that employees association serve? Are they just an employee advocacy group, lobbyist, something like that?
That's it, advocacy group and lobbyists. What I found valuable from them was they would come to us with issues because the employees would come and tell them, and they would start off saying, they'd give us this broad, we have an employee that's blah, and wouldn't tell us where they worked or anything, and I'd say, listen, if you really want us to help you, first of all, you got to tell us where they work. Secondly, it would be helpful if we knew who it was. Mm-hmm. And I built that trust with them where they would do that so that we could begin to make an impact. But yeah, they were definitely a lobbyist, mm-hmm. and they would, we had to just deal with it. They would take credit for everything we did. Like they took credit for all the compensation stuff, and they never had any part in that at all. But it's like whatever, But that's you hit the nail on the head. They were advocate and lobbyists.
What's your sense of how that process would have been different if they were also involved in bargaining? Because that's my sense of one of the biggest challenges here. Is that administrations of both parties have run into issues with negotiating with the employee unions.
Well, again, because I tend to approach everything from a really optimistic perspective, I'd want to sit down with them and say, talk about the things that I like, for instance, learning and development. How can you argue with learning and development? They might argue with the competitiveness of it, but they shouldn't. And performance management. Shouldn't everybody be doing great customer service for the taxpayers? So I think that would have had to have been my approach is let's talk about things that, because I would tell the head of the employee association, I'd say, your job is easy, you just have to worry about the employees. I said, I not only have to worry about the employees, and he knew I did, I said, I also have to worry about the impact on state government. I have to worry about what's the organizational impact. And then I have to remember who's paying for all this. So it's a three-legged stool, and you go, well, you got me there.
I'm Peter Lees, U.S. Merit System Protection Board, and I wanted to ask you about your implementation of the dual track system for technical versus supervisory jobs. We haven't done a good job doing that in the federal government. I wanted to hear what the state is doing in implementing that.
Well, it's interesting because we thought it was, the Commissioner of Environment came to us and asked us to partner with him to do it, and it was so successful, we really would have liked to have done it, say, for accountants, for all your technical, and we couldn't actually, we really couldn't get any excitement from anybody else, but what I could do is send you something that shows, because it really is, on one side you've got, say, 4 levels for the technical, so it gives you an opportunity to advance technically without having to lead people. And then the other side is the leadership side of it. So yeah, I want to advance, and I'm happy about leading people. But if you'll give me your card, I can get it to you.
I'm Don Bathurst. I'm an Academy Fellow. This is an area I'm very interested in. I see where you went, finance nerd to HR cop.
I'll let you get away with it.
Thank you. But leadership and general management, program management are agnostic to subject matter. And you're a case in point. Finance to HR made great change. In fact, a lot of times not knowing the details can help. You have 23, I think, commissioners, different program areas. Does your program in leadership either offer opportunity or a set structure rotation of leaders, especially at the senior levels, across those areas?
We were moving in that direction. It's interesting you should ask that because I know it doesn't happen at the federal level, couldn't. We would have people all the time. In fact, I can remember the chief operating officer calling me up and saying, could you talk about poaching at the next cabinet meeting? And it was because people would find a good employee from another agency and they steal them. And our response was, look, if you're gonna talk to somebody, especially at that high level, like I'm not gonna go start having a conversation with the deputy commissioner of environment without picking up the phone and calling the commissioner first and saying, I'd really like to talk to them. And I think that was the thing. But the research that our most recent research indicates that one of the best things you can do to really keep people engaged and excited is to have that being able to cross over in agencies. Now, we did start a Governor's Fellows program at the state. I think we just launched the 4th class, and we hire college graduates, sometimes postmasters, sometimes they have law degrees. Again, they have to apply, and we get them from all across the country. And they come in and work, because I mentioned Customer Focused Government Committee that came out of that survey that the Commissioner of Finance did back in 2011. When the chief operating, that committee met at least once a month to work on those cross-functional issues. And we used, they were a great resource for me when we were even working on the TEAM Act. But when the chief operating officer was hired in July of 2013, he looked at that and he said, customer-focused government is not an initiative, it's a mindset, and every cabinet member needs to be a part of it. So I think this is another big success on our part. The governor convened cabinet every 2 weeks for the first 6 months because we were all new and we were all trying to figure out what in the world we were doing. And it was helpful to him and to us. And it really, it helped us bond too. So that was really helpful. Every 2 weeks for the first 6 months. When summer hit, we said, okay, we'll go to monthly. But then in July 2013, we started having monthly customer-focused government meetings. And that's where I would use those meetings to come in and share, if I'm going to launch a huge initiative, that's a great sounding board to say, okay, cabinet, here's what's coming, would love your input, because it's going to impact, anything I'm doing is going to impact all of them. And I think that's really, again, it's that whole collaborative approach. So did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
One more question, and then I want to go back to your remarks, so you can finish.
Well, thank you for letting me sneak in, too. The gentleman to my left and my right had the wonderful experience of trying to institute a performance management system in the Department of Defense that was not unlike what you've been doing in Tennessee. And among the problems that they experienced, I hope you'll apologize for speaking for you, but among the problems that they experienced was the problem that managers found that the kind of hands-on performance management that they were doing required as much as 40 weeks per employee or more. Not 40 hours a year per employee or more. So that for a supervisor with 6 or 8 direct report employees, it was a significant burden. And since their regular day job requirements weren't reduced, that meant that they had to do it in their spare time, which caused a lot of angst among supervisors. Did you discover anything like that, or you had a significantly lower burden? It seems from your reaction to that.
We heard some of that, but here's what I would tell folks. And I started this with my own team. I began to monthly have my direct reports update me on how they were doing on their goals, on those work outcomes. And so we talked about by the time it came time to have the interim discussions and then the final rating, it was just an annoying little process we went through that didn't really take that long. Because I think for a lot of people, they dread it so much that they make it bigger than it has to be. And the way ours was structured was you had to have 4 to 6 work outcomes that were indicative of the bulk of your responsibilities. And clearly, the higher up on the career ladder you were, some of those were transformative. But typically, it evolved around for the average employee, if you look at their job description, you would say, yeah, that makes sense. Those work outcomes make sense. And then it was just a matter of making sure that they put just enough comments in there that the employee felt like they were actually giving them some feedback. I know that, and you might want to think about, we were really pleased with letting the employees put their comments in first, because it actually makes your job easier. Because if they're doing it, and not everybody did, we didn't make it mandatory, we didn't say you have to do it, but for those employees that did, I heard so many supervisors tell me, oh my gosh, that's the best thing we ever did, because they're actually giving me the feedback. And of course, you're going to have your share of those that say they did stuff they didn't do, and so you've got to be savvy enough for those outcomes to know whether they're telling you the truth. But it really is, to me, it helped kind of put the burden back on the employee, that you tell us the great things that you did, and most of them love it. They just think it's a bragging opportunity. So I think that might be, we were surprised at how positively that was received. The employees felt like it gave them a voice, and the supervisors said, wow, I forgot they did this, so that, I think that could possibly help. But I'm not saying I haven't heard that, because I have.
Want to go on with the rest?
Okay, so real quickly, I thought you all might want to hear about our total compensation focus, because what we were really trying to do was transition to, you only have so many dollars to spend, and what we realized, we did a total compensation study, and we were, if you compared us to the book of business that I think it was the Hay Group that did the study for us, we focused a whole lot more on benefits than we did on salary. And I think a lot of people in this room know that the folks that are coming into the workforce today, they want the money. They're not as concerned. They want the benefits, but not to the extent that we were putting the focus on the benefits. So we wanted to reallocate the pieces of that pie. So, but we needed it to be long-term financially stable. We wanted the market competitiveness, and we wanted an employee focus. And so we actually used that council that I mentioned that we started back in 2011 after that conference. We used them as a focus group, even for pay for performance. And so I talked about implementing the 2013 salary study. We then transitioned to a hybrid pension plan for new hires in 2014. We've got a defined benefit pension plan that's been out there forever and ever and ever, and it's not financially sustainable. So our state treasurer implemented a hybrid, so it's part defined benefit, part defined contribution. And new hires, everybody who came in since July of 2014 is in the hybrid plan, and that's going to help. And every change we made like this, it freed up more dollars for salaries. So back to your question, about the investment. We also eliminated retiree health care for new hires in 2015, because everybody, once you're on Medicare, it was going to be your responsibility if you wanted anything beyond that. So again, for new hires, because you know how hard it is to take it away from existing employees. We then eliminated longevity for new hires in 2015. The longevity is still out there for anybody who was hired before 2015. You get $100, even me, believe it or not. I was a limited term appointment, but I got longevity. So I said, thank you very much. Got $800 my last year in. You got $100 for every year of service, capped at $3,000, and it's paid once a year on your anniversary date. And we would have loved to just have rolled it into base and kept going, but that's where the State Employee Association no, they don't want that, they want to keep it, so we said fine, but we eliminated it for new hires, which is another reason why you have to do the competitive, when we do the salary studies, we look at total compensation. So when we're comparing this new hire to this senior leader, this senior person over here, they're going to have $3,000 more than this person's going to have. And then we implemented a consumer-directed health plan in 2016, again, in a way to reduce costs. Anything you can save on the benefits side, you can put over into the salary piece. And I mentioned, we've already talked about pay for performance and market competitiveness. So that's our total compensation focus. Just reallocating the pie. We really, our goal was to be able to pay competitively, and we feel pretty good about where we ended up with that. So data-driven decision making. I went to the first conference with my peers in July of 2011, and I think I told Steve, I walked into the room and I thought, wow, this is a small conference, and that's when it hit me that I only had 49 peers. It just hadn't dawned on me yet. But they do this great thing where they go around the room and talk about their greatest challenge, their 3 greatest challenges and their 3 greatest successes. And I heard from at least 5 other states that first year that they were being absorbed into either finance or administration. And I thought, ooh, this isn't good. And they were really concerned about it because they know the more diluted HR gets, down the chain, it's harder to have the impact you want to have. And so I came back to the team, and my general counsel gave me a hard time about this one. I asked them if they, I said, y'all, we have got to be relevant. We've got to demonstrate the value that we bring, and we cannot be a one-hit wonder like Wild Cherry. And everybody kind of looked at me. And I said, play that funky music, white boys. But it got their attention because we are a non-revenue producing agency that actually charges every other agency so much money per month per employee to provide the services to them. And if I can't demonstrate to them the value that we're bringing, they could just say, we don't need her department anymore. We can do this ourselves. So what I realized though, and here's the nerd, that this is the accountant in me coming out, my team struggled with demonstrating the value that we bring, the metrics. They just struggled. I mean, they could calculate turnover and all the typical HR stuff. And so I met a gentleman who ran a firm called Mass Ingenuity. It's still out there, that really focuses on metrics. And we brought him in for 2 days and spent time sitting down and talking about what should we be measuring and why. Best 2 days we ever spent. We created a dashboard. We identified all of our work processes and who were the owners of those processes, and then the sub-processes.
And that's in your packet, kind of the dashboards.
And as a result of creating the dashboard, we then had quarterly report outs of the metrics. And I would tell the team, and the dashboard, it's green, yellow, and red. And I would say, don't freak out if it's red. There's usually a good reason. Let's talk about what it is. And it's become it's ingrained in our culture now. It's really fun to hear the team all of a sudden start talking about, oh, and I measured, I thought about this, and I went back and I looked at the trends. And it'll even let you know where your customers are causing you problems. I'm telling you, because it would be red and they'd say, well, let me tell you what that is. And so a great example is, we will, and y'all deal with this all the time. So an agency says, I need to make hires. So you advertise, you get the applications in, you go through them to determine who's going to be on the register, and you send them the register. And then they never use it. And that was happening over and over again. Because agencies were like, well, I went on vacation, or I was too busy, or blah, blah, blah. So we targeted who's our biggest offender. I'm going to go and talk to the commissioner. And they don't like it when you come and say, you're an outlier in a really bad way, but it gets their attention. And so I'm a huge fan of data-driven decision making. We started off because I wanted to know, how do we know how good we're doing? How do we know? I mean, our customers can tell us through surveys, but how do we know how great we're doing? And I discovered first, it was a HR Excellence Award that was a partnership of the Nashville Chamber of Commerce and the Middle Tennessee Society for Human Resource Management. And we applied for that and won 2 facets of it. We won it for HR strategy and for learning and development, surprise, surprise. And then after we won those, I discovered the Baldrige Excellence Framework. And how I discovered it is two of my direct reports came to me and said, hey, we want to be examiners for the Tennessee Center for Performance Excellence, and that's the nonprofit arm of Baldrige in Tennessee, and we need you to sponsor us. And I said, okay. I said, you got something I can look at? So they gave it to me, and I thought, oh my gosh, not only is this going to make them better, but it's going to help our organization, because they're going to get, it gives you that systemic look of an organization. So they went to examiner training, then they came back and said, we want to submit an application to Baldrige. So I said, okay. So we submitted it, and Steve mentioned that we have reached a level 3, which is pretty cool, because level 4 is as high as you can go. And the only thing that's keeping us from getting a level 4 is we haven't been doing metrics long enough, because you got to have the trends. And so, but everybody gets now why we do what we do. That's our Baldrige application that's in your packet, that 50-page document. That was our, I think it says level 4. We went for level 4 because you can submit more paperwork. And it's hard to cram it all into one thing. And we got a level 3. We're really, really proud of it. They decided not to apply for it this year because it's a new administration. It's just too crazy right now. But they're going to go for it next year. And what I love about Baldrige is it says, is your organization performing as well as it could? So you can answer that one of 2 ways. If you say no, then you clearly need to be talking to them. If you say yes, the next question is, how do you know? And they're going to want you to show them how you know. And what I love about it, and I listed the 7 criteria in case you're not familiar with them. It is, so leadership. You got to be leading well within your organization. Strategy, you got to have a strategy for what you're doing every day. Customers, you got to have a customer focus, and they always talk about the voice of the customer. We really, really focused on the voice of the customer. Measurement, analysis, and knowledge management. Your workforce, operations and results. And I mean, you think about that. That's the systemic look at an organization. So if there's any other nerds in the audience that really want to be able to say, yeah, this is what we do, and this is why we do it, get involved in Baldrige. It is the coolest thing. We like getting the award, but that's not why we do it. You get this amazing feedback report. You have people come on site that could stay for days, 3 or 4, and ask more questions about your application, but they give you this amazing feedback report that they highlight, this is the cool things you're doing, and then OFIs, opportunities for improvement. And see, that's what I love, is it's that, it just feeds that continuous improvement, lifelong learner. I'm a lifelong learner. I think most of you in this room are, you wouldn't be here. So I encourage you to get excited about data-driven decision making. You heard me talk about how we knew that applications were going down. That's how we knew to hire a recruiter. At the same time, our retirements were beginning to ramp up. So it is so cool to see. It's also the correlation between learning and development and promotions. Data is amazing. Can't say enough about it. And then I wanted to talk just quickly about shared services. The state started, I think they started first with accounting, and surprisingly the head of accounting at the time, who was also a CPA and on the GASB board, came to me and said, we want to centralize HR, we want to centralize accounting, we want to start with you, with your agency. And I said, okay, because even though I get it, that's not my team's focus. Accounting is not their focus. And I said, okay, we'll do that. And then I helped her centralize, because there's a whole, as you all know, when you're centralized, there's a lot of HR stuff that goes into that. So we centralized accounting, centralized procurement. I saw that y'all have got a major IT initiative, and that's been really fun. We actually brought a company in and had them assess what do we need in state government and what do we have, and then begin to create the structure, and it's being centralized as well. And the cool thing about that was we found out that everybody wanted a data scientist, but everybody can't afford a data scientist. So if you centralize HR, you can actually afford IT, you can actually afford 2 or 3 data scientists that support everybody. And so HR was the last to go, and that's good and bad. It's good because we learned from our customers when they were so frustrated with all the other centralizations, what not to do. It was bad because by the time it came to us, everybody was done. It's like, can we really stop doing this? And so I looked for champions. That's just, I'm gonna go find people that can get excited about it. And our Department of Agriculture raised their hand to do it first because she was subtle about it. She said, what if you, because our goal was centralized transactions to our department, because we've got a phenomenal lady that oversees all the transactions, all the HR transactions, and we knew that we did not have consistent, repeatable processes across the enterprise, and that was our goal. So let's just bring them all in-house. That frees up the agency HR people to focus on recruitment, retention, workforce succession planning, learning and development. We want them focused on the strategy of HR. And so centralized transactions, and you're going to have to give us people to do that, because we can't just take the work and not have the people. And so she was brilliant and got me aside and said, could you take our transactions and let us keep our positions so I can have a talent management business partner? I'm thinking, how can I argue? She's wanting to go strategic, and she's wanting my help to go strategic. So I said, let me talk to the team, because I've learned, don't make promises the team can't fulfill. And I went back, and sure enough, they said, it's a small enough agency, we could absorb it. And then she became a champion. And that's, again, you gotta have champions to help you do what you want to do, and you gotta collaborate. So I've told you about what we're doing. We actually created process maps for every HR process, and we used some of our customers, key customers that we knew were really good, to do that. And then we shared those process maps with all the HR directors so that they could say, yeah, this makes sense. So here's what I'll do in HR in my agency, and here's what DOHR will do. That's been really helpful for the consistent, repeatable processes. And then this is one of my favorites. We created a 6-question survey, big survey, that goes to, this is part of the centralization, it goes to the agency leadership. And they can send it to whoever they want to, but it's typically been agency leadership. And the number 1 question is, went right out my brain. It basically, what you're wanting them to tell you is, what do you need from your HR team? There's 6 different questions. What do you need to meet your business needs? And it could be, I need to get applications to hire process faster. It could be, I need more employees to be developed. It can be any number of things, but it was the same survey going to every agency, and we did it, we're doing it an agency at a time. We're not sending this survey out to everybody at once. We do it an agency at a time. The governor loved it because he said, HR is actually surveying their customers, imagine that. And what's great about it is it then comes up with it becomes their SMART goals, it becomes their work outcomes, what you get back from that survey. Because they're saying, yeah, you really do need to get your processes better on hiring people, or whatever that is. And so that's been really, really helpful, because I told the governor when we started this, we're going to have agency HR people that are going to say, well, if you take transactions, what am I going to do? And sure enough, we had that. But then we have our share of strategic HR ones, and that's the ones I would like to start with, because they're typically going to champion it. We also employed we call them service partnership agreements. So it's basically I think y'all call them service level agreements, but we like partnership, we like that word partnership. So
A copy of that is in your handout as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And there's metrics in there. So here's our responsibility to serve you as our customer, and you've got responsibilities too. So that's in there, because we implemented a service center, an HR service center, as a result of centralizing HR. And so there will be metrics like timeliness of response, effectiveness of response. And but those service partnership agreements are signed by the agency commissioner and by the commissioner of human resources. And then one last thing, our focus on employee engagement. We were doing all this cool stuff, and we really didn't know, other than anecdotally, whether or not things were how it was impacting the employees. And so we started with our agency and did an employee engagement survey. And we're using IPMAs because the beauty of that is then we have benchmarks. They can benchmark us against everybody else who's using one. And I was so excited. 92% of my employees completed the survey, and close to that said they would refer other people to the state of Tennessee to come and work. And so that's now, we now have that as a benchmark, and we're driving that throughout every agency, working with them to implement either, and both really, an employment engagement survey and a climate survey. We also introduced stay interviews. Are y'all familiar with stay interviews? Love stay interviews because you use those on your high performers. It was so funny because Trish told somebody about it, and they went and did it for all their employees, and they said, that didn't work so well. And she said, did you do it with people you didn't want to stay? And they had. So, but it's a beautiful tool for your high performers just to say, hey, you're really important to me. I actually salvaged my chief operating officer. There was a layer between us, and I knew I was having some issues with him, and boy, did I find out those issues when I talked to her as part of the stay interview, and I expired his appointment as a result, and saved an amazing, everybody loves our chief operating officer, so it's an amazing tool. You can keep people by doing those stay interviews, because you learn things that you just wouldn't have thought about if you hadn't sat down and had those conversations. And then the last thing, and I noticed, Steve sent me an email today, the articles that are in Gov.
Workforce Week.
Okay.
Yeah, just all the GovExec articles.
And it was talking about telework. Well, we started with telework back in 2011, and we wouldn't let people telework unless they had SMART goals. Because how are you going to, we had supervisors that say, well, if I can't see them, I don't know whether they're working. And I'm like, really? Are you standing over this all day to find out whether or not they're working? But we said, you can't telework unless you have SMART goals. Well, then we graduated from telework to what we call alternative workplace solutions. And it really, it focuses on the mobile work, because you guys have it too. You have inspectors that don't need to be in the office every single day. And it really does, it's made a huge difference. We tell them, start with the position. You know, could the position work remotely? And if they could work remotely, start there. We had some people that were saying, okay, if the position can work remotely, everybody in that position is going to be like, you can't do that, because I had a guy on my team who has 7 children at home, ranging in age from 1 to 10, and his wife homeschools them. And he said, do not, we call it AWS, Alternative Workplace Solutions, do not let me AWS again. I can never AWS. So I said, you can't, you start with a position, and there's some people that don't want to. Some people don't want to work remotely, but I'm sure you guys have probably much worse traffic issues in DC. Nashville's not great, but I'm sure it's worse here. And even letting people work one day remotely, it can be huge. And it sends a message that you trust them enough to do it. As long as they're getting the work done, I mean, it's a great way to really, again, you're focusing on the workforce and saying, we care about you, and we realize that life can get crazy, and let's take that into consideration. So that was another huge hit for us. I just wanted to share with y'all. It's a huge strategy. In fact, the lady that used to run AWS left state government and is going and selling it to other states.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Rebecca, thank you. I hope what you heard here today was a lot of energy and the comprehensive nature of what they did over a 6-year period of time. It wasn't fixed training, it wasn't fixed compensation, it was end to end. And that's one. 2, a total incredible investment in the employee at all levels was made as part of this, to respect them and honor them. And one of the things I said at the top of this was that this is about respecting the employee and the organization and the government, and you balanced that wonderfully, so thank you very much. I do want to thank Alex for just making all this happen here, for Napa for
Yes, thank you, Alex.
helping to host, and of course to Rebecca for sharing all this wonderful stuff with us. Thank you very much.